Okay, so let's start. Hello, everybody. My name is Raquel, and it's my privilege to be here and to introduce this important webinar in the company of Pedro and Paul. This webinar will be open to questions, and on the end of each presentation section, it will be possible to answer to 3 or 4 questions by raising your hand or by asking directly on the chat. Although after the presentation, there will be a specific time dedicated to Q&A, where you'll be able to clarify your doubts. I hope you enjoyed this time with Pedro and Paul, and I will pass directly to Pedro so we can start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. We can see here from the time zones that all these compliments are applicable. I see here a lot of familiar names, but of course some new names. So I will introduce myself. My name is Pedro Silva from OPCO. I'll just share here also my screen just to make the context before I hand over to Paul. So just as a brief explanation and a brief context for the situation. Let me see if I can manage this. Probably not. But so my name is Pedro Silva. OPCO, we are a Portuguese company. We are active here in Portugal, but also in other countries, in Europe and also outside of Europe. And just to give an introduction of this event and why this event, you already saw my face as well as Paul. Paul also from Quality Partner, and it will be Paul to take most of the presentation. We have also to say thank you to Inova-Ria. I'm not sure if I can... no, it's okay. Inova-Ria, an agency also here, an association here in Portugal that supported us in the communication and organization of this event. And also to let you know what you can see here on top, the Auditor Club. This was an idea that we explored, that I talked also with Paul during our Automotive Summit last year. I know that some people were already interested in taking part. So things are not always as we want in terms of organization and in terms of sending the information. So this is the first event. And we would like to open here and to invite all of you to take part, to send not only the questions for this webinar, but also proposals, suggestions for later on to give more, more content to this Auditor Club. This is the first event, and this is also included in an organization that we at OPCO are taking. Some of you probably know already the Automotive Summit. Paul is one of the participants since the very beginning, since 2019. But this year we decided also to take another step. So what you can see here, the 10 and 20, this is a program that we are promoting in order to celebrate that we are in the market for 20 years, first as OPCO Academia. But for those who know us, you know that back in 2015, we split the company that existed before. So it will be also 10 years that we took that split. So in between 2025, 2026, we will celebrate first the 10 years of OPCO creating solutions and then the 20 years of OPCO itself. And for that, this is also one of the first events to happen. We will have another one tomorrow dedicated to sustainability. This one together with the Portuguese Automotive Cluster. And what we have planned is, as you can see here, a series of events that can be in remote, like this one. Some others will be in presence here in Portugal. And we will take the new standards that are coming up news that are coming up in the next months, in the next 2 years. Some of them related to VDA QMC standards. So the next one will be related with the VDA 6.8 process audit for supply chain. And we'll be taking these several activities, including harmonization of standards that are planned for next year in between AAG and VDA, and looking to the future and see if for last quarter 26 we will have news about a new ISO 9001 or even a new IATF. So this was just a brief explanation to pass the context of the situation. And without further ado, I will stop sharing and pass now to Paul. Thank you very much. Paul?
Right, yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. So I'm really delighted to be here with you. As Pedro mentioned, my name is Paul Hardiman from Quality Partner. I'm old enough to have been involved in the IATF scheme right from the beginning, so more than 25 years ago, and obviously have seen the evolution of the scheme, both the standard changing, but also the rules changing. So Pedro asked me for this kickoff for the Auditor Club if I would give an overview of some of the key changes in the IATF rules, 6th edition. And I'm doing this webinar on behalf of Quality Partner, not an official IATF oversight office, but I want to be honest with you and give you an insight as to some of the key issues in the rules, some of the key changes in the rules, and as we go through, give the opportunity for you to ask questions. As Raquel said, that you can either type your questions into the chat and we can take some of those questions at the appropriate point, or it would be great to hear some of you at appropriate stages as we go through. So this is the agenda for what we're going to cover, broken down into 6 modules, an quick update on the IATF scheme, a brief introduction to the rules, and then really getting into some of the detail about the implications in Rule 6 for audit duration, the different things in terms of preparing for IATF audits, undertaking audits, and audit reports, and closing out findings. Now, I guess some of you here are going to be from clients that are certified. Some of you here may be third-party auditors, and some of you here may be consultants. So you all have different perspectives on what hopefully you're trying to get out of the session that we have together today. So let's just give a brief update then on the IATF scheme. We can see that there have been some changes in the IATF membership over the last 5 years. We've seen the Geely Group, the Chinese-based conglomerate group, join in 2021. We've seen Iveco Trucks join. We've seen Volvo Trucks join. So IATF is open to new members, but the key for membership is that you have to mandate IATF certification to all your direct suppliers, which is why there's some vehicle manufacturers that we don't see on this membership list because they don't have a global policy mandating IATF certification. But this is the group that approved the rules. This is the group will decide the future of the IATF scheme. In terms of certificate numbers, most of you will know that IATF publish statistics. They publish statistics on the numbers of certification and also monthly the top 10 and top 10 major and top 10 minor non-conformities. We have just reached a milestone. We've just reached 100,000 sites certified to IATF 16949. And I use the word sites. So that is 100,000 locations where value added manufacturing occurs. That doesn't include all the offices, design centers, central locations. That will be on top of the 100,000. They would also get audited, but IATF count the number of certified sites. And maybe a frightening statistic is that 80% of those are in what IATF call the Asia Pacific region. Just another quick update on the scheme. IATF have published a document called the IATF Auditor Guide. This tends to be the document that there's least copies purchased of. Obviously, the standard is number one, the rules is number two, but I believe there is some really useful information, whether you're a first-party auditor, second-party auditor, or third-party auditor. There is some useful information in the auditor guide, particularly now there is a new section. If any of you are working in a corporate scheme with multiple sites, that is an area that IATF has tried to clearly define what are some of the key skills needed to audit in that type of environment. So that is now available for purchase. Pedro mentioned about revisions. Obviously, there's been lots of changes in the program for ISO 9001. I think Pedro's understanding is aligned with mine, that we won't see a revised ISO 9001 to at least September 2026. And my view will be we will not see a revision in IATF before that date. So I think we will likely see changes maybe at the back end of 2026 or into 2027. So it's watch this space. And as Pedro mentioned, as soon as more information is available on those, then we'll share them. Pedro, I don't know if there's any questions you've got or anybody else about the scheme itself. That was really just the warm up.
Yeah, from my side, no. I don't know if someone would like to raise some questions right now. I think not. Just would like to highlight as you did, Paul, the auditor guide. It's not so much well known for internal or second party auditors, but definitely there is a lot of useful content in there. We have had a couple of activities that involve that with some of our customers. Things like the process approach and the risk-based thinking that are also mentioned there can be very useful also for the internal auditors.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it can also be a criteria that you can qualify your internal or second party auditors. So because there's what knowledge do auditors need, and then what skills do they need to demonstrate doing an audit? So it's worth having a look at. Yeah.
There is here one question from Xavier. If there is a draft for the IATF 2026.
Not yet, because there's not one written. There's not one written yet. There's some of the very early discussions within IATF, but there is no draft yet. And now when they come up with a draft, if they do what they've done before, they will put it out for comment. But that would be, I would say, end of first quarter next year before we'll see that. But if you think about the changes since 2016, I think there's going to be more consideration of automation, highly automated processes. I think the standard is very much written around widgets at the moment. And widgets often that people think are, being hand assembled or made on very simple processes. But if we think about some of the technology in semiconductor bulk materials, the standard I don't think has been updated to reflect that change in technology. So hopefully we will see some developments on that in the next revision. Okay, let's go into the introduction then. So I think the reason many of you joined, you will already know that we have gone from the 5th edition of the rules, which was issued in 2016. And obviously there were many sanction interpretations against that. All those sanction interpretations and new requirements have been incorporated into the 6th edition that became valid from audits that are carried out from the 1st of January 2025. Now, obviously, in the first quarter of 2025. It's going to be somewhat of a transition, but certainly by the end of Q1 2025, the planning and undertaking of all audits will be done in accordance with the 6th edition. And all third-party auditors have been through modular training and examination to qualify them to go out and do audits aligned with Rule 6th edition. So 3,400 auditors went through that third-party auditor online training and examination. One of the questions I often get is, well, where can you buy the rules and who has to buy them? So you can buy the rules in hard copy format. You can buy the rules in electronic format, in ebook format. They're around €40 to buy the books. You can buy them from any of the IATF oversight offices. Industry Forum is the training provider to SMMT, the UK oversight office. Through their web shop, you can buy copies of the rules. My recommendation is, if we have clients on the webinar, that you should have a copy of the rules. Yeah, because when you get into section 5 and beyond, there will be things that will affect you and responsibilities that you have to provide the certification body information. So I would strongly recommend, if you haven't already, any certified clients on the call, you do purchase a copy of the rules. Eligibility. There's some ongoing discussion about eligibility. In my view, the eligibility hasn't significantly changed. Yeah, these are things that are homologized to be on the road, and typically they're going to be carrying goods or they're going to be carrying passengers. So it always used to be said, well, it's trucks, cars, buses and motorcycles, with the intent, and they could be the manufacturers of those. It could be first tier suppliers, second tier suppliers, third tier, fourth tier, fifth tier suppliers. But the key thing is organizations have to demonstrate they are in the automotive supply chain to be eligible for IATF. In terms of terminology, much of this terminology would have been in Rules 5th. So an organization has to have manufacturing capability. So they have to have at least one value added manufacturing activity to be eligible for IATF. Yeah. The manufacturing site is where that manufacturing occurs. At the manufacturing site, there could be support functions. So, for example, a central purchasing function supporting other sites could be included in the manufacturing site. There could be standalone remote support locations that are providing support to the site. We use here an example of a warehouse. So that would have its own audit program to verify the relevant requirements are being met to support the site. We could have remote design centers, and we could also have indirect support locations, could also be called remote of remote. So the rule on this is that there can be no interaction between the indirect support location and the manufacturing site. So the indirect support location is supporting a standalone remote support location. Yeah, but this is a term that was not included in the 5th edition of the rules and will affect particularly large global organizations that have many offices around the world. And it will influence whether those offices are audited on site or whether maybe they're included in audits remotely. So that's just a very brief introduction to the rules. Pedro, again, I don't know if there's any questions on that part.
Yeah, here from the chat or the Q&A, no, but I have a question regarding if you can go up one slide.
Yeah, sure.
For the indirect support locations. So in the end, as you mentioned, they will be remote support to remote support locations.
Yeah.
So they will still be audited. They will still be according to the defined scopes from IATF.
Right. So they will not appear, those addresses for the indirect support locations will not appear on the certificates, on the annex of the certificates.
Okay.
It will only be the standalone remote support locations that will be on the annex. But for example, if we're auditing a design center, and that design center has people that are working in remote offices, yeah, but they are getting all of their direction from the design center. They're not in any way, shape, or form interacting with the manufacturing side. It's people in the design center that are interacting with the manufacturing side. But they are providing support to the design process. The auditor working for the certification body in their audit planning would understand if there are any indirect support locations, and then they would decide how they're going to include that indirect support within the audit. But it could be that they could include them by using remote auditing techniques. They wouldn't have to physically go and visit every one of the indirect support locations.
Okay, and as I see, these examples of this can be, for example, software development centers.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, because if that software development center is providing support to the design center, yeah, but has no contact whatsoever with any manufacturing plant, then it could meet the eligibility for that. If the program management, for example, is being done in the design center, but they have some software development experts working in a building, then they could be included in the audit by using remote technology. The same as if those people were working out of their homes. They're using the process approach, they would be included.
Yeah, that's a new situation after the pandemic. More and more people working from their home, or sometimes we find sales, for instance, that are people that don't even have an office. They work from their home in certain markets, supporting remote locations or even directly the manufacturing sites.
So now I think the rules has accepted the changes driven by COVID and working. So those salespeople, if I was auditing the sales process, let's say in the company headquarters, but 90% of the sales resource were home-based, then depending on the scope of the audit that I was undertaking and the projects that I select, we would use remote technology to dial in those relevant salespeople into the audit.
Of course. Okay, thank you, Paul.
No, good. So audit duration then. Let's have a couple of slides thinking about that. So the stage 1 readiness review was 1 to 2 days under Rules 5th. It is now the stage 1 readiness review is 1.5 to 3 days. And that is made up of a 2-stage audit. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Half a day has been allocated for the auditors to do good audit planning. Now, I think that is a good move. Maybe the clients won't think it's a good move because they might have to pay for that. And the auditors, I think, will say it's good because I think historically planning has been done in the weekends, it's been done in the evenings, it's been done on aeroplanes. And I think it's been proven that if you don't do good audit planning, you won't do a good audit. So IATF, I think, can see that that has been an issue historically. So now they have said for any audit that half a day has to be added to allow for the auditor to do effective planning, and that time has to be allocated to the auditor and put into the IATF database. There have been auditors that have done over 300 audit days a year under Rules 5th. How were they ever planning properly for those audits? So I personally think that is a good move, and it should result in better audits by auditors doing better planning. The other change that we see about audit duration. So audit duration now is made up of the base audit days plus additional audit time. So the audit days, we can go to table 5.2 in rule 6, and that will give us, depending on the organization's size, it will give us the number of audit days for a stage 2 audit, for a surveillance audit, for a recertification audit. Another change in rule 6 is the maximum reduction that can be made to audit days in any situation is 30%. So that again has changed since rules 5th edition. And then if we take some examples of additional audit time, it would be verification for previous minor non-conformities. It could be additional time needed for translation, could be additional time for the use of a technical expert. It could be that in audit planning, significant changes have been identified, so time to investigate those significant changes. It could be IATF OEM quality or delivery issues. Yeah, it could be scope expansion, or it could be relocation. So lots of things on top of the minimum audit days could add to the audit duration by adding additional audit time. And there are some really good examples in rules 6 in Annex 1 that will give examples of calculation of the audit days. A couple of examples then. So if you take in the middle, we have a single site not yet IATF certified. So they're certified with your certification body, for example, to 9001. They don't have product design responsibility, and they're applying for IATF certification. Under rules 5th, the audit days would have been 6.5 to 7.5. The 6.5 would be if there was a 1-day stage 1. The 7.5 would be if there was a 2-day stage 1. If we take the same example for rule 6, the audit duration would be somewhere between 8.5 if we took 1.5 days for the stage 1 and 10 days if we took 3 days for the stage 1. Whether it's 1.5, 2, 2.5 or 3 for the stage 1 is the certification body decision based upon the size, based upon complexity. Yeah. So there is generally an increase in the number of audit days, but also on the right-hand side, you can see some other changes. For example, some organizations were going for stage 1 audit, and then the next day the auditor had planned the stage 2. That can't happen under rule 6. There must be a minimum of 20 days between the closing meeting of the stage 1 and the start of stage 2. Another change, audit planning information has to be supplied to the certification body a minimum of 30 days before an audit. Half a day planning time. The audit plan must be provided to the client a minimum of 14 days before the audit. I think a lot of clients will clap to that because some were getting their audit plans maybe the day before the audit. They've rounded up the amount of time in production. It was 1/3, but in Asia, they don't tend to like fractions, so they've changed it to 30%. Only the draft report can be left at the end of the stage 2 audit, and then it has to go through technical review before the issue of the final report. So I'm just giving you on the right-hand side there a flavour for some of the things that have changed between rules 5th and 6th for a brand new client applying for certification. But the bottom line is it's more audit days. And this is a client that is already certified, but with an extended manufacturing site. And there's been lots of debate about this. Yeah. So under rules 5th, the extended manufacturing site would have been audited as it supports the site in terms of additional manufacturing capability. Under rule 6, In this case, because the extended manufacturing site is more than 10 miles or 16 kilometers from the site, it would have to get its own site certification. Now, where the 10 miles has come from, or 16 kilo has come from, who knows? But this was being abused, and I've seen cases where certification bodies were certifying extended manufacturing sites that were in different countries, thousands of miles away from the site, which was never the intent. Extended manufacturing was where there is a small building close to the manufacturing site under the site management, but they need extra space. It's not ever meant to be for complete standalone separate sites. That would be more corporate certification. So again, there would be significant change for this client in Rule 6, because the extended manufacturing site would then end up having its own IATF certificate, and it would be the extended manufacturing site would have the main site on the annex of the certificate to provide support. Yeah. The other thing is, if any organization was on 6 or 9 monthly surveillance audits, that has disappeared. So now the standard is 12-month surveillance audits. So it's still a 3-year certification where you would have stage 2, surveillance 1, surveillance 2, recertification, surveillance 1, surveillance 2, recertification. There's no 6-month or no 9-month now allowed under the Rule 6 edition. So let's see if there's any questions, Pedro, on audit days. Yeah.
Here there are 2 questions from the attendees, and I believe they are related. One, Philip is asking what is applicable for a self-assessment audit. And Marcel is asking for internal audits, if the audit day rules should be also applicable.
Can you just repeat the second one again? I got the first one.
If the first one was for a self-assessment audit, so I'm interpreting it also as an internal audit, or to ask to a supplier for a self-audit, a self-assessment. The second one is for internal audits, if it should be the audit days rules applicable as well.
No, I think no to both of those questions. So the table 5.2 is for third-party audits in the IATF rules. The self-assessment, there's been a couple of changes on that. Under rules 5, the certification body could do what was called pre-audits. Under rule 6, they cannot do pre-audits anymore. But if you want a self-assessment, so that could be where you do the self-assessment internally, where you hire a consultancy to do that self-assessment. There is no mandate about how many audit days those audits are. You could use the guidance in table 5.2, but they're not mandated. Exactly the same for internal audits. That table 5.2 is not really appropriate for internal audits. Again, you could use it for guidance, but for internal audits, it would normally be that you wouldn't audit the whole company in one audit. You would break it into smaller process audits. So I don't think table 5.2 will be a lot of use for internal audits.
Even this situation, and I think it's also a long debate, if it should be the number of employees to dictate the number of audit days. Well, it's the rule. Now we have the risk-based audit days determination for the customer satisfaction. But here for the internal audits, and when we are asked also to do internal audits, we look more to the manufacturing processes, to the organizational processes, to see how long it should take the audit. It should be that the orientation.
Now I think there, in my view, there's weaknesses in just taking the head count in calculating the audit days. Because, for example, if you have a manual process, you would have maybe 10,000 people. But it's very, very simple process. So the auditor ends up with 25 audit days, what do I look at for 25 days? Where if you take a highly automated process, like a semiconductor manufacturer, they might not have vast numbers of people, but they have very, very complex processes to audit. So I think we always have to look at table 5.2 to be the minimum audit days. If we were auditing a very complex manufacturing process, but they didn't have a big headcount, we could always add additional audit days to the table. It makes it very clear it's minimum.
Okay. We have also here Gorur asking to go back to example number 1. But I'm not sure exactly what is the question.
This one. Yeah. So this meant to be an example of where a new site wants to get IATF certification. It has a total of 326 people because we have to include the temporary workers in the headcount. And if that fluctuates, we take the 6-month average of the temporary or agency people. This is a second-tier supplier, so they're not supplying direct to an OEM. They're already ISO certified. They don't have design responsibility, and they're applying for IATF certification. This slide was just meant to show that there is going to be more audit days and more cost for this second-tier supplier to get certification.
And Gorur just put here some more clarifications. Can an engineering services company into design and drawing for automotive parts get IATF certification?
No,
I think
good,
this is the
good question.
Right.
So no, at the moment, to be eligible for IATF, you have to have at least one value-added manufacturing process. So I think that excludes some key players in the automotive industry, design centers, software centers, that are not designing, they don't have a manufacturing process, so they're not eligible, but actually they're a key influence on the supply chain. So I think in the next revision of IATF, there may be a change in that. But as today, if they don't have at least one value-added manufacturing process, they are not eligible. If they make a tool, the tool is important, but if the tool doesn't go into a vehicle, the tool manufacturer can't get certification.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Goruri is also asking if design is not a value-added process. Well, no, in the sense that it does not transform the material, right?
No, it's a value-added process, but not a value-added manufacturing process, which is the eligibility. So they would get 9001, but they could adopt the principles of IATF. That if IATF changed the rules, then they could become certified maybe in the future.
We had a case a few years ago of a situation like this: a good company, engineering company, designing and then outsourcing the manufacturing. So themselves, they could not be certified. So the answer was, okay, let's bring in some manufacturing processes.
Let's
outsource some others, and in that case, they could get the certification. For these design centers, if they are supporting a manufacturing site, they can be audited and considered as a remote support location. But standing alone with the current rules, no.
They can't. And that's not an option that they have to be included if they support a manufacturing site. But if they don't support a manufacturing site, it's just a standalone design center, then they can't get a certification. We have a hand up, I think, Pedro.
And I'm not seeing, but there is one more question from Maria
2 hands
Gonzalez.
up.
Good morning from Spain. Buenos dias. Is there any change regarding corporate schemes?
There is change in corporate scheme, but the main thing is there is less discount. So in other words, there's more audit days. But the context of the corporate scheme, having a central location, having a common quality management system applied to all sites, that principle will stay the same. You just get less discount than you would have got under the rules 5th. But corporate scheme still exists. there's a new section on auditing corporate schemes, as we mentioned earlier, in the IATF Auditor Guide.
Okay.
Hello,
Yeah.
Paul, sir. Good morning. Good morning.
Good
from
morning.
India.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, sir. Actually, I have one regarding this. In Rule 6, you have mentioned that 30% minimum of audit time of production, all process, manufacturing process, and shift. So, sir, is it applicable during operational review in stage 1 audit?
No,
Like
no,
30.
no. In stage 1, you have the 2 parts. So the first part is more the document review, and the second part is more going and having a walk around the facility, asking a few questions, but there's no requirement for 30% of the 1.5 to 3 days to be used in stage 1. That's up to the auditor to split the stage 1, part 1 and part 2 to how they use that time, either in the 1.5 days or the 3 days. The 30% doesn't apply to stage 1.
Okay, so this is a requirement for only for stage 2 audit, right, sir?
But for all other audits,
Yeah.
So it could be stage 2, surveillance, recertification, transfer. Obviously, again, it won't apply to special audits, because special
one
audits,
more-
it depends on the scope.
Okay, one more clarity required. Thank you very much. And one
Yeah.
more clarity I required. During the stage 1 also we required to receive this data from the client 1 month before, and we need to share the audit plan 14 days before for stage 1 audit. Or
No, for the stage 1 audit, what you will have before you go to the site is the application information and the organization quality manual. All the others you will look at when you're at the site. So you'll be looking at the site at how have they defined their processes, how are they measuring the effectiveness and efficiency of their management system, customer performance data. They don't have to provide that before, because you're going to be reviewing all of that at the stage 1 readiness review.
yes. That's why my worry is, so client maybe if they will not provide this data before 30 days, so is it possible to continue a stage 1 audit?
Yeah, stage 1, yeah. Stage 1, the rules say clearly that the information that you need as an auditor is the client application information and the client quality manual. The rest of the information you're going to be reviewing when you get to the stage 1 readiness review.
Okay, very good, sir. Thank you. But our
No,
CV and
yeah.
other body is confused. They are telling you need to collect the data 30 days before for the stage 1 audit also.
Right. I will seek clarification of that. I have a meeting with SMMT tomorrow then. So that is a very valued point. So let me, if there's any difference in my interpretation, but certainly that's how I've read the rules, that what's the point of them sending all that information when you're actually going to review it during the 1.5 to 3 days anyway? Because the stage 1, you're not, the audit plan is going to be much simpler than it is for a stage 2 and onwards. But no, good questions.
And one more thing, Paul sir, before 40 days before this sharing the plan also very difficult, because operational review only will get all this data during the stage 1 audit.
Yeah.
So this is not the requirement now. What you told, this is not applicable for stage 1.
No.
Okay,
It's
thank you very
applicable
much.
for,
Thank
or
you.
it's applicable for all other types of audit. But I will, if there's confusion, I will raise that point, because I can link in to IATF oversight and say there's confusion and maybe we need to get some clarity on that. So I'm glad that you raised it. Right. Should we move, Pedro, to let's move to this
still,
one. Oh, sorry.
There is still one more question from Sentil in the UK regarding the audit scope. If a design does not have a value-added manufacturing site, should the service processes still be planned and audited as part of the overall audit?
In any IATF audit at any of the 100,000 certified organizations, the auditor has to, in their audit planning, verify, has the client got design responsibility?
Yeah.
And if they haven't, then design is out of the scope. The scope will be the manufacture of widgets, and the input would be the client, the customer design requirements. You're going to make to a drawing, going to make to the customer specification. If the client has responsibility for any aspect of product design, that product design has to be audited. It could be on the site, or it could be a remote support location, but it all depends for that site. What are they manufacturing, and who has the product design responsibility? That's the key question.
Okay, and one more from Isabel, to see if I understand it. So we have support activities in a remote plant, 200 kilometers, like human resources, management, and purchasing.
Yeah.
That is why we were considered a remote plant. With this change on the rules, these support activities need to come to our plant to be audited. If I correctly understood, the answer is no. It's remote support functions.
No. Yeah. So back to my slide I showed earlier then, that if any site needs to get support, in this case, they're getting support, let's just say for HR, from a site or a building 200 kilometers away. That has to be audited as it supports the site.
Yeah.
So that could be audited as part of another site audit if it's resident at a manufacturing site, or if it's a standalone remote support location, that standalone remote support location would be audited to verify the support they're providing to that site. In the case, for example, human resources. So I don't think there's any change. The change is about extended manufacturing site. That's where this 10-mile or 16-kilometer rule comes in. That's nothing to do with standalone remote support locations. They could be in different countries, in different regions, wherever in the world they are. They have to be audited as they support a site. The 10-kilometer rule, the 10-mile, 16-kilometer rule is only where there was an extended manufacturing site, not HR, not design. Yeah.
No, that will remain the same, Isabel. The remote support, remote locations, the scopes, if it is wherever, it is the same. That rule is only for the extended manufacturing site. Where we had 1 or 2 customers here in Portugal that exceeded those 16 kilometers. In that case, I believe the best solution is the corporate scheme, where the previous main site will be providing support in several scopes. So we don't need.
The way the audit's done, it will just be more audit days, but the way the audit's done won't change significantly.
Exactly.
But you'll end up with 2 certificates rather than 1. But the way the audits, the way the site processes work will be the same.
Exactly.
So no, some good questions. Yeah,
that was we were talking about that, and I was looking yesterday on LinkedIn. So now the extended manufacturing site will need to have a plant manager, engineering manager, blah blah blah. No, it will stay the same, but they will have support from the main site. Yeah.
I think a lot of people outside of automotive don't get this context of what was the extended manufacturing site, which IATF tried to bring in for where people have got a building, but they need a smaller building very close to support the site. And all that's going to happen in that other building is manufacturing. Nothing to do with engineering, or it's just manufacturing. That's the definition of an extended manufacturing site.
Okay, one more question from Osvaldo, but let me see if I can read it. Suppliers of parts for approved industrial, agricultural, and construction vehicles that circulate on public roads are now also eligible for IATF. Spare parts also apply. What has changed?
Oh, right. This is the $1 million question. In my view, and I've sought clarification from IATF, that agricultural vehicles made by Caterpillar, for example, their primary purpose is not passenger carrying or goods carrying. They might have to go from on the road to get from construction site A to B, but their primary purpose is not to carry passengers or goods. So in my view, the scope hasn't changed. In some people's view, it has changed, because if they're homologized to go onto the road to get from building site A to building site B, in theory, they are eligible. But that, watch this space. I think there has to be more clarification on what is exactly meant by automotive vehicles, because that is what is in the scope, automotive vehicles. In my mind, it still excludes the likes of Caterpillar, JCB, earth moving equipment, rice cutters, combine harvesters. The primary purpose isn't a road going vehicle, even though they might go on the road to get from farm A to farm B. The second question about aftermarket, again, a very hot topic. Obviously, IATF allowed aftermarket manufacturers to get certification. I don't think they've put the framework in to do it in a structured way. So I think there's a lot more work to do there. We only have to read the title of IATF, and aftermarket is not included. And there's been no sanction interpretation. The IATF scope 2016 is for production and service parts. No mention of aftermarket in the title of the standard. So how can you certify somebody that makes aftermarket parts for a title of a standard that doesn't include aftermarket? But it has been included. The $1 million question is, if an organization makes parts for OE or service parts and they make aftermarket parts, do they have to include them in the scope? Yeah. My personal view is no, but there are some members of IATF that say yes. So I think that there has to be more clarification on that. And there has to be a timetable. If you're going to force aftermarket manufacturers that are part of a certified site to include aftermarket, for some companies, I was a well-known tire manufacturer last week, it would take them 3 to 5 years to bring all their aftermarket processes up to IATF level. So there has to be a timescale to allow companies to make the transition, but there's also financial implications.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot more to clarify on that.
Yeah, definitely. That's the situation. Even when IATF released that Q&A document end of last year, a lot of confusion was coming up. And what we are doing, we had a situation with one of our customers with that case. And now we just highlight for the companies to align with their certification bodies what is the interpretation and what is reasonable to
include. So watch this space, everybody. We'll keep working on get better clarification on that whole situation around aftermarket.
Okay.
Let's quickly go through. Oh, sorry, one more, is there?
Yeah, the questions are now coming up. There is, regarding EMS, extended manufacturing sites, an extended manufacturing site in California, that is the last operation for the manufacturing process, started in the mother plant in West Virginia. After 12 months running, will the extended manufacturing site have to get their own certification, IATF?
Yeah.
Well, not even after 12. Yeah, 12 months for the data.
If it's a new site, then it would need the 12 months performance data. If they haven't been supplying automotive or they haven't been in business for 12 months. But the bottom line would be that they would have to get a separate certification.
Okay, and the next question, let me see if I understand. I'm trying to listen and read at the same time. I think this one is for the remote support locations. Same doubt as above with slight modification. Our organization is a multiple site organization and we have many secondary remote support locations. Perform design verification, validation, and this doesn't get audited so far. By Rule 6, do we get audited for these secondary remote support locations? I think this is another
This is
topic.
the support, the indirect support locations, I think we're talking about there.
Yeah, but I've seen, I'm not going if correct or incorrect, I've seen some companies being certified having clearly remote support locations, like purchasing, for instance, and the CB not considering that, assuming that all the activities are done on site. This might be the case. In fact, you have those support activities from somewhere in your organization, but somehow they were not identified as remote support locations.
That's often found on witness audits, for example, where the auditor says, oh, right, I want to audit purchasing, and the client says, well, we don't do it here, it's done in China. Okay, but that's not been included, historically, where it should have been. So I think some companies have got certification where the remote supports have not been correctly audited. But that won't necessarily change because of Rule 6. That is just the certification body not doing a good job at working with the client to identify those. One point I haven't mentioned that I think is important for that last question is the remote support locations will be entered separately now into the IATF database, and they will have their own audit program. So the remote support locations will not be part of a recertification audit. They have, for non-design remote support, they will have 2 yearly audits. One of those two yearly audits has to be on site. The next 2-year audit could be remote, on site, remote. For design, they still have to be audited annually, but it could be audited on-site, remote, on-site, remote. But they never have a recertification audit. They'll have their own separate audit program to support the manufacturing sites that they support. That's quite a key change in Rule 6.
Yeah. And one last question, again from Gorur. If aftermarket parts are safety related and homologated, should it also be IATF? I think it's 2 separate topics, right?
Yeah. So I think that the whole point about if you have an aftermarket manufacturer and they only manufacture aftermarket product, the only reason that they would go for IATF is either their aftermarket customers are mandating it, or the organization themselves makes a decision. It would be good business sense to apply the IATF principles. IATF won't make a standalone aftermarket manufacturer. They cannot make them go for certification. The big question comes where you've got aftermarket product being made on a site that manufactures OE or service parts, which could be safety or non-safety related, like my tire manufacturer that I was at a couple of weeks ago. They make tires for OE applications, but they also have a massive on the same site section that makes aftermarket tires. Typically, or historically, that was left out of the IATF certification quite rightly. Now the question is, do they have to bring that within the scope? My view, no, unless there is direct input from their aftermarket customers, or they make their own decision. But that's the big topic up for discussion at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good.
Paul, thank you. Let's move on.
Some good questions. Yeah. Let's move to preparation then. I think, to be honest, we've covered some of these. So this is for stage 2. This is for surveillance, recertification, transfer audits. The client has to provide the planning information a minimum of 30 days before the planned audit. If you want some good bedtime reading, 5.7.1 of the rules says what that information is that the client has to provide. The auditor then reviews that information, identifies risk, and develops a risk-based audit plan. Send the audit plan to the client a minimum of 14 days before the start of the planned audit. Now, again, there will be arguments, well, that's not achievable. But I think clients need 14 days to make sure all the relevant people are going to be available at the times that have been allocated. It's no good sending the audit plan the day before the audit. So this should be that if the client provides information at least 30 days before, it should give the auditor that half a day to review the information that should be planned and issue the audit plan. The only potential missing information could be management review. So this is where the client says, I'm not going to supply you the management review. There's lots of confidential information. So in that case, you would have to add 2 hours before the start of the audit to review that missing information. So that's slightly different, that they have to provide all the other information. The only exception is management review. Yeah, so that's for the planning. Again, I don't know, Pedro, if there's any questions. I think we've already covered some on that.
There is one from Sukamaran. If remote locations audit need to collect pre-planning information data as well.
You must have been reading my correspondence to SMMT last week, because in my view, if you have a two-man sales office or two-lady sales office, yeah, two people in a building, yeah, so they have to be visited, yeah, but do you really have to get them to send information before the audit because they only have one process, which is sales? And do you have to add half a day? Yeah, because there might only be a 2-hour audit, but if you're adding half a day planning time, what is the auditor going to do if they're only going to go and audit a very, very small sales office? So in my view, the half day is mandatory for any manufacturing site. In my view, and I'll stress that very clearly, it should be at the discretion of the certification body whether they add the formal planning time to remotes. If you had 1,000-person design center, absolutely, it would make sense to get half a day planning, to ask the client what projects they're working on in the remote, who the projects are for. It would make sense to get some planning information. But most of the planning information for a design center that is in 5.7.1 would be not relevant. So I think that rule has to be clarified, yeah, on what information is needed for the planning of remote support locations, and do we have to add half a day? My personal view is I don't think it's clear at the moment. That's got people excited, hands raising.
Yeah, also Cindy is asking if the scorecard is included in the 30-day review requirement. I think so.
Yeah, a hard copy of the scorecard would be part of the pre-planning information. But we'll talk actually in a minute, but let's cover it now. That remember, there used to be 1 hour in Rules 5th before the start of the audit, where the auditor had to review the online scorecard and any changes. That 1 hour now has disappeared, but the online scorecards, if there are any, have to be reviewed as part of the opening meeting. Yeah, but in the 30 days before, you have to provide customer performance data, which may be a screen print of the scorecard data. Yeah, it won't be electronic, it will be copies, but the auditor, when they get to site as part of the opening meeting, will have to look at the updated scorecard data online where it is available. Obviously, all companies don't provide online scorecards. It will only be where available.
And Sumit had his hand raised, but now
it's taken down.
Yeah,
maybe we've answered it through the other question.
Yeah, maybe.
But I think we've got two more short sections, and then we'll have plenty of time for open questions. So I've already mentioned the first point. Then this is about undertaking the audit. That any changes in the planning information would be reviewed as part of the opening meeting. So most auditors will be happy that the audit day that used to be 9 hours for the first day can go down to 8 hours. Yeah, we don't have to add that one additional hour for the pre-planning before the opening meeting. Something that hasn't changed is every audit, apart from stage 1, stage 2, surveillance, recertification, transfer, all manufacturing shifts must be audited. And all manufacturing processes must be audited on every audit. But this is also causing a bit of confusion, I think, within the rules. All manufacturing processes must be audited on all shifts at stage 2 over the surveillance audit cycle, recertification and transfer audit. So on every single surveillance audit, the auditor must cover every shift and they must cover every manufacturing process, but they don't have to cover every manufacturing process on every shift. That would be over the surveillance audit cycle. Yeah. 30% minimum of the audit time must be spent in manufacturing. It could be more, but 30% minimum must be spent. It used to be 33.333, etc. percent. They've now rounded it to 30%, just to make it easier, I think, particularly for Asian people that don't necessarily work in fractions. Yeah. And all organization processes must be audited on stage 2 during the surveillance audit cycle, recertification and transfer audits. That's not really changed between rules 5th and 6th. We have some diagrams in rules 6. Some people say, what is the automotive process approach? Now, I'm not really sure this diagram actually helps, but the automotive process approach, in my view, has always been clear that it's an audit of the organization's processes, their sequence, and their interactions. And also it's questioning about the risks, the opportunities, and the performance against the defined process targets, obviously with a focus on processes that directly impact the customer. And all of this is, I think, explained far more detail in the IATF Auditor Guide. But this diagram tries to show a pictorial, if you like, about how the automotive process approach should be based upon processes, sequence, interaction, risk, and performance. Pedro, again, we've got one more section. I don't know if there was any specific questions on that section.
Summit was lower at the end, but writing here. So if the pre-planning information for remote and site manufacturing, both in 4 hours for pre-planning. Yeah, it's the old information for the preparation.
Yeah, so that would be, if you're going to do an audit of a remote support location and a site together, that may be where they're quite close together, where you can do the audit over consecutive audit days. Yeah, so the audit plan might cover a half-day audit of a remote sales office on Monday, and then the site audit starts on Tuesday and goes Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So it's over consecutive audit days. In that case, you would have one set of planning information from the client, you would have one audit plan, and you would undertake one audit. If the remote is not going to be done over consecutive audit days, it would have its own audit plan. Yeah, but the debate is, what does the client have to provide for the auditor to provide that audit plan? I would say relevant planning information, but not all the planning information in 5.7.1 of the rules.
Okay. And also from Javier, if the extended manufacturing site has to be audited in all shifts in every audit, or is it possible to cover the shifts over the cycle?
Good question. Well, and the honest answer is I don't think that is 100% clear in rules 5th or rules 6. Yeah. But the key thing is the extended manufacturing site has to be audited on every audit because it's value added manufacturing. You're going to be using some of the 30% of the available audit time to do that. If they have different manufacturing processes in the extended manufacturing, then they have to be audited, the different manufacturing processes from the site. And if they're operating exactly the same shift pattern, then my view would be you don't have to audit all of the shifts on every surveillance audit, but you would on the stage 2 recertification and transfer audits.
Okay. And Sumit is also asking if the remote location audit is different days. So according to the example you gave, if it is different days, during main site pre-planning, can we cover both main site and remote location, provided same auditor does both locations?
Well, we can't put them in the same audit plan because they're not done. If they're not done over consecutive audit
it's
days,
not the same.
But in that case, if the planning information covers planning information from the remote and the site, to enable the auditor to put an audit plan together for the remote and an audit plan together for the site, then I would say that is okay. Yeah,
Okay.
as long as they have enough information to put a risk-based audit plan together for both the remote and the site. If that planning information is sent together because the audits are coming up within a similar time period, then I think that would work. If you have the site audit in March, but the remote audit isn't till May, then I think that's a bit different. But if they're being done in the same time period, but not over consecutive days, I think that would work. Good question.
And if the remote audit is different days during main site, okay, it was the same. Nguyen is asking, I'm not sure if it is a question or affirmation. Same main site, every process in every shift during stage 2, surveillance cycle, recertification and transfer.
Yeah. So this is a confusing, and it's probably when I do the third-party auditor training, the most difficult to explain, and it has changed slightly. So every audit has to cover all shifts. By every, just exclude stage 1. All the other types of audit have to include the auditing of all shifts, including a sampling of shift changeover. Under Rule 6 now, all audits must touch upon all manufacturing processes. And then when you combine together the 2 surveillance audits, over those 2 audits, you have to ensure that you've covered all manufacturing processes on all shifts. Yeah. So for example, we might audit injection molding on shift 1. They have a shift 2, but we've already audited shift 2 in another manufacturing process. So on the next surveillance, we would have to cover injection molding shift 2. So we cover it over the surveillance cycle.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Paul.
The last little bit then is about reporting. So one of the changes in Rule 6 now, auditors are not now empowered to leave the final audit report. So at the end of the audit, they would leave a draft audit report, and that draft audit report has to go through the certification body technical review within 20 days from the closing meeting of the audit. So that is the technical review just saying it's okay to issue the final report. They will look at the non-conformities, the wording of them, the grading of them, and they will confirm the auditor's decision to issue the final report to the client. That's new. Yeah. The other thing that is new is for major non-conformities. Before, it was at the discretion of the certification body whether or not there was how much time was added for the special audit. Yeah. Under Rule 6, there has to be a special audit to verify the effective implementation of corrective action, and 1 to 3 hours per major has to be calculated for that special audit. So, for example, if you're doing the verification of 2 majors, it would be between 2 and 6 hours. 2 hours minimum, 6 hours maximum. For minor non-conformities, that are not verified on site, that remote verification is done. And the next audit, then, there would need to be additional audit time. Again, Rule 6 is prescriptive. For each minor non-conformity, it would be between 0.5 and 1 hours. That has to be added for each minor non-conformity. So if there were 4 minor non-conformities, they were accepted remotely by the auditor once the client had submitted in their corrective actions, but they weren't verified on site. there would need to be between 2 and 4 hours additional audit time to do the on-site verification at the next audit. So the key difference there is the prescription of how much time was added. Under Rules 5th, it was at the discretion of the certification bodies. Yeah. And some CBs were adding like 10 minutes per non-conformity, which really is not enough to do effective verification. So IATF put their big boots in and specified specific times. So we have, I think, about 13 minutes, Pedro, don't we? If we're going to stick by our timing for any questions on things that we have covered, or maybe things that we haven't covered that people have got questions on.
Yeah, there are here a few more questions, and this one is interesting from my point of view because it happened with me last week, although it was not third-party audit. The 30% to be spent in manufacturing, does it mean on the shop floor?
Right. I think if you ask IATF, they'll probably say yes. But if you're auditing a semiconductor manufacturer that's got a lot of inline automated controls, manufacturing execution system, my argument would be you need to spend more time in the control room, talking to the technicians and things that are making adjustments and controlling the process, rather than randomly wandering around what is called the shop floor, but all you're going to see is boxes of machines. Yeah. So I think the common sense view says it should be auditing the effectiveness of the manufacturing process. If it's a hands assembly process, of course, you're going to spend most of your time down on the shop floor. If it's a highly automated process or bulk material, a paint plant, for example, point is wandering around looking at machines. You're far better looking at the control room where all the controls is done.
Yeah.
So I think there has to be a degree of common sense there, that it's auditing the manufacturing process, not sat in the conference room. That's why this rule appeared. This rule appeared because I did witness audits and many others did witness audits where auditing and manufacturing was done in the conference room, staring at a slide deck. That's not. It's getting your butt out of the conference room, down into the work area where manufacturing is performed, but that could be a control room.
Yeah, I find it interesting because sometimes we are auditing on the shop floor, manufacturing process, but then you have to go to a laboratory to see the result of a test. So it depends on what you consider also the shop floor, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also what is the organization included within the scope of their manufacturing process. So, for example, if they have a very active TPM program, when you're auditing manufacturing, if TPM is part of production, then you're going to be auditing that when you audit the manufacturing process. So, yeah, I think the 30% is to get, I never stand there with a stopwatch on a witness audit. It's really just making sure the intent is that the auditor is using a proportion of the audit time to audit the effectiveness of the manufacturing process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, then if last year major non-conformity, again repeating this year in same clause with major non-conformity, what is the situation?
Right.
Rule does not say anything on this.
No, because you've already escalated. So if you have major non-conformities at the previous audit, they would have been verified on site in a special audit. Yeah. So those non-conformities would be closed, and you wouldn't have to verify them at the next audit. So if you found the same problem at the next audit, then again you raise the major non-conformity. But again, you would have to be very thorough on your special audit and say, have they truly addressed the root cause or causes of that problem? But it's a really difficult one that you almost question in that case, did you do effective verification of the first lot of major non-conformities? Because if you did, why the hell are they coming up again?
Okay. And Sumit is asking, if technical review is not done within 20 days, shall we share the final audit report to client within those 20 days?
You should not. Well, the
No.
textbook would say, if I was doing an office audit, I would be saying to the certification body, what is your process to ensure that reports are reviewed and released within 20 days? Yeah. It can't be an excuse, well, we've got too many reports to review, then consider why haven't you got more resources? So again, that's maybe a bit hard because I know it's hard for the certification body, this additional requirement, but there can be no exceptions to that. You can't issue a report unless it's been through technical review, full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it will be for the CV not to comply with the IATF KPIs
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
in that
Yeah.
direction.
And that the CV could end up with a non-conformity. It won't affect the client's certification. It just means they might get the report a bit late. But remember, any non-conformities they would have had in the draft report. So they would still be working on the non-conformities from the date of the closing meeting.
Okay. And Craig is asking what section of the rules show the hourly requirement for major NC follow-up, in case any person is challenging against that.
So that's in 5.2. I can't remember all the clauses. Oh, I've got it. So it's in 5.2.2. If you want to be specific, it is C1. Yeah. By total chance, I got my rules open on that page. Yeah.
William is saying 5.2.2.
5.2.2 C1. Yeah.
Okay.
5.22 C1. Yeah. See, I didn't make it up. Yeah.
And Paul, now we have here a great question. Bom dia, Rick, from one of our customers. If the auditor raises 0 non-conformities, so they are the auditee.
Yeah.
If they have an audit and the auditor raises 0 non-conformities and the auditee does not agree with that, to whom can they complain?
The first should be the certification body. So they should say, we don't felt we had a thorough audit. So the first point of call should be the certification body. If there isn't a report from feedback from the certification body, it can be escalated to the relevant oversight office that certification body reports. If it's still not addressed, you have the third possibility, which is the ethics point on the IATF Global Oversight website. So maybe you think, well, I know why the auditor hasn't raised zero non-conformities because there is some ethics issue. Then that could be raised through the ethics point. But IATF monitor the performance of every auditor. And you can be damn sure if auditors never raise non-conformities, they will be picked for witness audit. Yeah. So, and that has happened. And I personally know it's happened. So there is a lot of monitoring of IATF saying, hang on a minute, this auditor is never raising non-conformities. Is it because they're not competent or because they don't want the hassle of the follow-up? Yeah. They don't want the additional workload.
Yeah, but that's a very good question from someone that is willing to get some information out of the audit, not just to pass through.
Not to tick the box. Yeah.
Very good question, Enrique.
Yeah, but there's two aspects of that. One is people getting no non-conformities, and politely, one is clients getting stupid non-conformities that the auditor feels they have to raise to keep their numbers up. But that's a different issue.
That we have also.
Yeah.
We have also. Okay. So I think we have still 5 minutes.
Yeah, if there's any last minute questions.
In case of, no, they are coming out. In case of supplier escalation, how should the supplier proceed according to the new rules? So I believe it's for a special status from Sarah.
Yeah. So if there is notification of a special status from an IATF OEM customer, then the organization has a responsibility to communicate that to the certification body. And then the certification body will investigate that. And that investigation could be a remote or on-site special audit to investigate the situation. Yeah. So that really, I don't, in my view, I don't think that's significantly changed in Rule 6, but there is a lot of focus on performance.
Okay. And here from Endotex, one of our customers, if they don't receive the audit plan within 30 days from the CB, what can we do? I believe it's not 30, it's 14 days. 14 days.
So assume that you've provided the planning information a minimum of 30 days, but you don't get the audit plan within 14 days, then firstly, contact your auditor and say it's an IATF rule requirement that you issue me an audit plan 14 days before the audit. You haven't, so you're contravening the rules. If that still doesn't fix it, then you have to escalate that again to the certification body. Because my argument would be you can't make sure all the relevant people are available if you don't get the audit plan. And 14 days, in my view, is reasonable minimum to get the audit plan. So it should be, now you can say it's not, you know, it's the IATF rule that should be issued 14 days before.
Mm-hmm. And Marcel is asking if there should be some reinforced focus, for example, for electrification or hydrogen-powered cars.
I think that would be some of the technical changes that might be in IATF requirements. I don't think that will necessarily affect the rules, but I think it will more affect the next version of IATF about, you know, highly automated processes, new technology. I think that will be the standard that will change because of that. But they're eligible. If those hydrogen cylinders are going into production vehicles, the hydrogen cylinder manufacturer is eligible if it's going into a car. And I know there are some hydrogen cars now being sold.
Mm-hmm. And Marcel is also asking for the eligibility of the aftermarket parts, but not OEM driven. I think this will take another half hour.
Well, yeah, but I think that the key wording is, by the fact they're aftermarket, there's no link to their OEM, no link. Yeah. If they're service parts, there is a link to the OEM, but aftermarket are not being made to OE specification, which is very surprising why they brought it into the scheme, because they're almost competing with the service parts, which are sold by the vehicle manufacturers. But the key word is there can be no link with aftermarket. They're not being made to an OE specification. And that raises the question, who's got the design responsibility?
Yeah.
Which is, I raised that when the whole thing kicked off, that surely if the OEM has no design responsibility, the organization has to, because they must have redesigned the aftermarket part to take out cost, maybe using alternative materials and things that are different to the OE spec. So who's saying that design is fit for purpose and safe? Has to be the client.
Yeah.
So there's so many questions around that. As Pedro said, we could get into another hour debate on that. Maybe a future webinar, Pedro.
Okay. So I think there is only one left question, is if we can share the presentation pool, if we can make it available.
Yeah, in PDF, I don't have an issue with that. Yeah. Remember, this is not an official, I'm not speaking on behalf of IATF.
Yeah, of course.
So it is a discussion where we've had some very good open discussion. There's a few points that I will take back to IATF oversight based upon, because I think there is confusion, and you've confirmed that you agree with me, I think, on some of the confusion: remote support locations, aftermarket, stage 1 planning. There's some really good questions that I would take back, but some really good questions.
Yeah, and still one last one from Ana Neves. Olá, Ana. A company has a small office with 3 sales guys in the country. that work remotely for headquarters in a different country, that is the process owner for these sales. Is it necessary now to have an audit on this small office? No. For these guys working remotely, if the process is managed in another place, it would be audited in the process owner. And these guys could be interviewed remotely.
But I think the only debate there, Pedro, is as soon as you put people into a building, IATF seem to treat it differently. If those 3 people were purely home-based, absolutely no debate. You'd audit the process owner and you'd call in the relevant remote people using remote technology. As soon as you put people in a building, it does open it up to the potential of being a remote support location. So yeah, if I was working at a company, I'd say maybe it's a good time to close the office and get people working from home. It make the audit a lot easier. Yeah. So yeah, probably people renting offices won't be happy with that answer, but yeah. Good.
Okay.
No, thanks everybody.
Paul, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much to all the attendees. So we will make available the presentation as a PDF document, and we will be working also on the edition of this video, then to coordinate with Paul and to release it on YouTube or any other platform. So thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Great to see you again, and we'll keep in contact.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.